I never thought I would spend Halloween night alone in the middle of an old warehouse, but that is the fate of any college student in this remote suburb of Wyndham Falls. I needed the rent money. Outside, the last night of October was bitter cold. Wind whistled through the window cracks of the old Hawthorne Theater, which had just hosted the town's exclusive All Hallows Eve ball. Thousands of people had flocked here to admire expensive costumes and temporary gruesome stage settings. Now at 2:15 a.m., only I remained. My job was temporary security guard and cleanup crew, meaning I had to stay behind after everyone left, ensuring nothing was missing and that the place was locked down tight. Rick, the manager, had left at midnight, abandoning me to the overly familiar silence of the graveyard shift. This massive space, bustling during the day, felt isolating and vast at night. The smell of burnt wax, stale beer, and a hint of disinfectant from the initial cleaning hung in the air. I walked down the main corridor, where black tarps covered the decorative mannequins, transforming them into bizarre shapes that seemed to lurk in the gloom. I checked the dressing room area. The sole remaining fluorescent light made every corner seem darker. I had to pick up discarded masks, a grinning white rabbit mask, a large antlered deer head mask, and toss them into the industrial bin. As I swept under the last makeup table, my hand brushed against something cold and hard. It was an old cell phone. I picked it up. It wasn't a modern smartphone, but an older slider model. No apps, just buttons. I tried to turn it on, but the screen was locked. However, when I flipped it over, I noticed a small piece of paper carefully taped under the battery cover. I peeled the paper off. There was only one line of neatly written text. "You should not work alone on Friday night." Friday, that meant tomorrow night. I felt a cold dread crawl up my spine. This wasn't a cheap prank. Thousands of people had passed through here tonight, but only a few knew I worked the night shift, and even fewer knew I would be working alone tomorrow. I tried to rationalize it. Surely it was an old employee or a friend of Rick's trying to spook me. I threw the phone into the trash bin. I returned to the main stage area to check the temporary security camera system installed for the event. The Hawthorne Theater lacked a permanent system. We used 4 low-resolution Wi-Fi cameras, all feeding back to a monitor in the makeshift office on the second floor. I climbed the dark spiral staircase. When I entered the room, the monitor displayed grainy, blurred images of empty hallways. I checked the footage from the evening. Hundreds of costumed, made-up faces moving about. Impossible to find anything specific. I checked the 4th camera, the one aimed at the rear exit door. It showed a static image. A corner of the parking lot, pitch black, illuminated only by the faint glow of a single street lamp. But then, I noticed something unusual. The parking lot image seemed vaguely familiar. I zoomed in on the area. Under the yellow sodium light, parked on the edge of the lot, half hidden behind an old dump truck, was a silver sedan. It wasn't an employee's car, and it had no logo. It was just sitting there, engine off, headlights off, just like the silent, waiting vehicle described in the sources. It looked like it had been waiting all night. I reviewed the footage for a few minutes prior. The car arrived at 11:45 p.m., shortly after Rick left. It just stopped and no one got in or out. I decided to check the old phone in the trash bin one last time. I retrieved it, used a box cutter to pry open the battery cover. Inside, I saw a memory card slot. I removed it and plugged it into my laptop, which I used for checking inventory logs. There was only one file saved. It was a voice recording. I pressed play. First, static. Then a low, masculine voice spoke. Neither mine nor Rick's. He works 2 hours every night before locking up, usually in the costume area. The only exit is the back door, near where the generator is placed. Silence. That was a detailed description of my habits, narrated to a second person, somewhere out of my hearing range. The voice wasn't loud but clear, recorded professionally. My blood ran cold. This phone was a listening device, and it had been activated inside the building. I hurriedly checked the parking lot camera again. The silver sedan was still there. The sun would rise in less than 2 hours. I couldn't wait. I needed to get out of here and call the police. I took the memory card out of the laptop and put it in my pocket. As I descended the spiral stairs to leave the office area, a thought flashed. If they knew I was working alone tomorrow night, they also knew what I was doing tonight. They could have been inside this building the whole time. I checked the rear door and the deadbolts, ensuring they were secured. No signs of tampering, but as I walked down the main corridor, past the black tarps covering the mannequins, I sensed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Suddenly, a strange metallic smell, reminiscent of blood, overwhelmed me. I stopped in front of the stage area. One of the draped mannequins was no longer standing straight. It was leaning forward slightly. I held my breath. Everything in this room was a prop, but the sense of terror was horrifyingly real. I stepped closer, my hand gripping my own phone tightly. I lifted a corner of the black tarp. It was a standard mannequin, dressed in a medieval knight costume. But on its head, instead of the helmet, was the sinisterly grinning white rabbit mask that I had thrown into the trash 10 minutes ago. And the eyes of the mask, previously hollow plastic, had been replaced with two polished black stones, reflecting the faint fluorescent light. They stared straight at me. I spun and ran. The main exit was about 50 meters away, but as I ran halfway, I saw it, the main door. The double emergency door that should have been locked from the inside as per procedure was cracked open slightly, just enough for a person to squeeze through. It wasn't a malfunction. He had gotten inside. I couldn't call the police because I didn't want him to know exactly where I was. I dashed toward the rear exit. Behind me, a noise erupted. One of the black tarps near the stage fell to the floor. And from underneath the tarp, a tall figure clad in a black hoodie stepped out. He didn't run. He walked slowly, deliberately. He wasn't wearing the rabbit mask, but I could see the lower half of his face, a wide, vacant smile. I knew he wasn't after money. His goal was far more personal and lethal. I accelerated toward the back door. I pushed the door open. It swung wide. I bolted outside, running into the freezing parking lot. The outdoor air was a brief relief. I needed to get to my truck, parked at the head of the lot. But as I ran past, I glanced towards where the silver sedan had been. It was gone. I didn't hesitate. I ran straight to my truck, unlocked the door, leaped inside, and immediately locked the doors again. I was gasping for air, a painful burn in my chest from the cold. As I tried to start the ignition, I looked into the rearview mirror. Under the faint streetlight, I saw the rear exit door was still wide open, and beside it, standing silently on the threshold, was the tall figure in the black hoodie. He didn't follow me out of the building. He just stood there, framed in the doorway. I cranked the ignition. The engine roared to life. I hit the gas and sped out of the parking lot, never looking back. As I drove along Ashford Road, the dark highway broken only by the sound of my tires screeching, I felt my phone vibrate in my jacket pocket. It was an Instagram notification. I pulled over at an abandoned gas station a few miles away and unlocked my phone. It was a direct message from an unknown account, with only a black profile picture. The message read, "You reacted faster than we thought. But it's okay." Accompanying the message was a photo. It was a photo of the night mannequin. The rabbit mask had been removed. Instead, it was wearing a blue knit cap. The same blue knit cap I had dropped in the dressing room while cleaning 2 hours ago. And beneath the photo, a short line of numbers was written, $1,500. I knew what that number meant. I had been a valued target. I wasn't the only one. I might have been the last. I deleted the Instagram account, turned off my phone, removed the battery, and tossed both the phone and the memory card into a sealed plastic bag. I didn't call the police. I knew if I did, they would ask questions I couldn't answer. Now I no longer work at the Hawthorne Theater. I moved to a new apartment, double-checking every lock. I try to blend into the crowd, but sometimes when I drive through Wyndham Falls at night, I still feel the gaze of someone watching me. And I wonder if he is still standing at the back door of that old theater, waiting for the next Friday night, or if he has found a new target. The most terrifying thing wasn't that he tried to kill me. It was that he saw my life as merely a failed project, a commodity with a price tag, and now he is ready to move on to the next one, and he is still out there, in the shadows in a hoodie, and perhaps he is still smiling. I still remember the atmosphere of that night. Not because it was Halloween, but because it was the first time I truly understood what it meant to be hunted. My name is Elias Thorne, and in 2018, I lived in a small wooden house in the quiet suburbs of Los Feliz, a neighborhood where everything always seemed wrapped in a false sense of tranquility. The city of Los Angeles always felt vibrant, but here on those late October nights, the quiet could become suffocating. Jack-o'-lanterns flickered along the walk, fake spiderwebs draped over bushes, and the cold air carried the scent of damp, dead leaves mixed with burnt caramel from candy apples. My neighbors, the Hendersons, had planned a big party. I declined. Instead, I chose to sit in the living room, watching an old movie, trying to savor the moment of peace I always cherished. I was used to the sounds of the city, a distant police siren, the grumble of a bus, but Halloween night brought a different kind of noise, the shrieking laughter of kids running through the street, the endless doorbells. Everything was normal until about 10:30 p.m. The noises had quieted down. I heard the wind whistling through the old window frame, and outside, the amber glow of the streetlights reflected off the damp asphalt. That's when I heard it. Not a heavy step or a door being smashed, but a tiny rustling sound, almost imperceptible, coming from the backyard. At first I dismissed it, thinking it was just a stray animal or a branch caught in the wind. But my backyard was enclosed by a high, solid wooden fence. The wind couldn't create such a purposeful sound. I held my breath, listening. My heart started pounding, an unnamed tension spreading through my body, a primal warning that the peace was over. After several minutes of suffocating silence, I decided to act. I reached for the heavy flashlight on the table, a useless object that nonetheless provided a sense of security. As my bare feet touched the cold wooden floor, another sound rang out. This time clearer, closer, the sound of metal scraping against mortar. Someone was trying to pry open the basement window. I knew I didn't have much time. Under the dim streetlights, I saw a dark, solid shadow pressed against the outer wall of the kitchen. He was tall and broad, wearing a thick black coat. And then I saw the face, not a face, the mask. A smooth white plastic mask devoid of any features except two dark eye holes and a wide, deep cut resembling a twisted smile. It was chillingly horrific, like a broken plaster statue. The cold feeling that rose wasn't from the wind, but from the realization that the figure wasn't just standing outside, but had found a way to penetrate deeper inside. I turned, retreating towards the bedroom, trying to minimize noise. My brain started processing the situation slowly, as if time had stretched. I had to call the police. I looked for my phone. It was on the coffee table, where I'd left it before checking the kitchen. Going back to the living room meant facing the basement window. I stopped. I knew I couldn't make the call immediately. Silence might be my ally now. I hid in the small hallway closet, pulling the heavy door shut, panting. From inside the closet, I heard the prying sound. It was no longer quiet. It was forceful, intense, like the collision of something made of steel. Then a loud noise, enough to shake the floor. He was in. I could hear heavy, definitive footsteps on the wooden floor. No rush, no panic. He was moving slowly, exploring. He walked through the living room, pausing slightly, probably scanning the room under the flickering light of the TV screen. I felt goosebumps rise. He wasn't a common thief. He was someone savoring the chaos he created. My body went rigid, paralyzed. I hugged my knees, unable to move, unable to take a deep breath, just waiting for the next horror. Fear had turned me into an inanimate object. I heard the footsteps advance into the hallway. The smell of mildew and dust in the closet became suffocating. Suddenly, the footsteps stopped right outside the door. I could feel his presence. Even without seeing him, I knew he was standing there, the white mask just inches away from me. I tried to assure myself that the door was heavy, and he wouldn't see me. But then, another sound. A slow, drawn-out scrape, like fingernails dragging across wood. He was running his fingers along the edge of my closet door. Then came the hissing, a low, raspy hiss, completely unnatural. Then he spoke. His voice was deep, distorted, not a loud threat, but a whispered declaration of intent. Found you. The fear completely paralyzed me. I realized that escape was not a game, but a deliberate hunt, and the carver had found his prey. My freeze response vanished instantly, replaced by pure adrenaline. I grasped the terrifying truth: he didn't need to find me. He already knew where I was. He started pushing the door, not trying to break it, but pushing hard, trying to use his body weight to snap the latch. I pushed back with all my strength, but he was too powerful. I felt the door start to bend. I looked around. My hand touched a heavy folding metal umbrella. I gripped it tight. He pushed again. The door sprang open a small crack. Through that narrow gap, I saw the distorted white mask and a hand in a black leather glove gripping the door edge. In his other hand, I saw a cold metallic glint. Not a gun, not a dagger, but a small shining hammer. He was preparing to strike. Without thinking, I raised the umbrella and stabbed forcefully through the gap, aiming for the hand holding the hammer. He let out a sudden painful gasp, releasing the pressure. I used my full weight to slam the closet door shut. 30 seconds. I knew I had to capitalize on his confusion. I didn't go back towards the living room or kitchen. Instead, I drove the umbrella through the thin wood behind the closet, where it backed up to the laundry room. The dull tip of the umbrella ripped through the drywall and paneling. I created a hole just large enough to squeeze through. I scrambled out of the wreckage, the smell of laundry detergent and fabric hitting my nose. He was still in the hallway, apparently trying to recover the dropped hammer. I ran. The laundry room led to the back door, but I knew it was secured by a complex safety lock that required turning a manual latch. I didn't have time. I ran straight into the kitchen. I saw the phone on the counter, but just then, the footsteps rang out again, faster, angrier. I grabbed the heaviest frying pan on the rack, a black cast iron skillet. When the white mask appeared at the kitchen threshold, he stopped, the mask's empty gaze fixed on me. He raised the hammer. I didn't scream. I said nothing. The instinct to survive was so strong it made me act in silence. I hurled the cast iron pan with all my might. It struck the mask with a horrifying crunch. The mask shattered. I saw the flesh beneath pale, and a stream of dark blood flowing from his nose. He staggered back, clutching his face. This was my only chance. I darted out the back door, ignoring the safety latch, slamming my shoulder into the wood. It burst open. I plunged into the cold Halloween night, bare feet landing on the dewy grass. I ran towards the street where the amber sodium lights flickered. I didn't dare look back until I reached the sidewalk. I turned my head. He was standing in the back doorway, one hand holding his bloody face. The light shone on him, and even with the mask broken, his distorted, furious expression was more terrifying than the mask itself. He stared at me, his eyes filled with the promise of imminent retribution. He started running. Not sprinting, but a steady, relentless pace like a professional hunter. I had escaped the house, but I realized in horror, this event was not a robbery. It was a murder, and I had become his only target on the desolate street. I ran aimlessly, my heart pounding louder than my bare feet hitting the asphalt. I ran past houses decorated with pumpkins and ghosts, feeling the mockery of the festival. Fortunately, I remembered the Hendersons' house. It was a place full of light and noise, exactly what I needed. I sprinted into their driveway, slipped on a patch of dry leaves, then struggled to get back up. I saw his car, a black SUV with no license plates, parked at the end of the street where the lamplight died out. He had planned his retreat. He wasn't a spontaneous madman. I used my last ounce of strength, slamming into the Hendersons' front door, where music was blaring. Inside, people were dancing, dressed as cartoon characters and superheroes. I stumbled into the middle of the living room, my breath ragged. A man dressed as a cowboy turned to look at me, my face pale, my bare feet stained with dirt and blood, either mine or his. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, concern in his eyes. "Police!" I shouted, my voice hoarse and trembling. "There's an intruder. He's outside." The crowd fell silent. Just then, a woman looked out the window and screamed, "There's someone outside." He had caught up. He stood on the threshold, his face distorted, looking inside. But seeing the blinding light and the multitude of witnesses, he stopped. His professionalism overcame his rage. He turned his back, walked quickly away, and vanished into the darkness toward the black SUV. The police arrived. Red and blue lights reflected on the lawn. They listened to my testimony, taking down hurried descriptions of the shattered mask, the hammer, and those unforgettable eyes. They told me I was lucky. They found the abandoned SUV a few blocks away. He had disappeared, blending into the city. I survived. But the story didn't end there. Like many who have experienced real-life horror, I never truly escaped it. I couldn't sleep for weeks. I changed all the locks in the house, sealing the basement windows. I knew where the real fear resided. It wasn't the pain, but the helplessness, the feeling that my body wasn't mine, forced to freeze when it needed to run. That fear became a part of me. Months later, I still wake up in the night, drenched in sweat. I no longer hear the laughter of Halloween. Instead, I hear the sound of the umbrella tearing through the wood. I check the doors, check the closet, and sometimes when I walk barefoot across the wooden floor, I feel a faint tremor, Not an earthquake, but a memory. I still see the empty gaze of the white mask in the darkness and feel the gloved hand trembling, ready to spring open the closet latch. Because like other urban ghosts, I know that although I escaped the attacker's hands, he is still out there, and on quiet nights, I still hear the whispering sound of the floorboards beneath my feet, echoing his final declaration, "Found you." I am 35. My job, a freelance photographer, often pulls me out of the house at hours when most people are asleep. That evening had been a grind. I had just finished a photo shoot for an upscale Halloween party downtown. The clock on my dashboard read nearly 1 a.m., though Fairmont, the mid-sized town where I reside, doesn't rage like the city. October 31st still leaves its traces, dry, bare maple trees illuminated by flickering orange lights, and dozens of macabre mannequins hanging from eaves. Exhaustion had eroded my vigilance, and I decided to take a shortcut through the estates, a labyrinth of sprawling mansions where smooth asphalt roads wound deep into the dark suburbs. Normally, I avoid these streets. They are designed to keep the outside world out. That night, as I turned onto Ashcroft Avenue, the sense of isolation was immediate and heavy. Not even the sound of crickets echoed back. The absolute emptiness of this setting, amplified by the Halloween decor, giant pumpkin figures staring blankly from perfectly manicured lawns, created a deep sense of unease. When you are alone on an empty road at night, you start to feel like the only person left alive in the world. I slowed down. The profound silence between the enormous architectural structures, with no streetlights penetrating the interlocking branches of ancient oaks overhead, was unsettling. I had been driving for perhaps 10 minutes, struggling to navigate the unnamed turns when I saw it. Something was parked wrong, even on Halloween night, and it wasn't decoration. A dark box truck, a utility van type, was stationed near an intersection. It wasn't parked neatly on the curb, nor was it entirely in someone's driveway. It was positioned awkwardly, slightly toward the center of the asphalt road. There were no headlights, no interior lights. The van was just a massive, motionless shadow, seemingly waiting. I told myself perhaps it was a group of teenagers planning a prank, or someone after a party waiting for a ride. But as my car passed it, my headlights swept across the front of a Tudor-style mansion set far back from the street. There, outside the perimeter of the property, I saw figures. 4 people. Clustered near the iron gate, they appeared to be wrestling with the large entrance. Given the context of a late Halloween night, their presence initially seemed normal. They were all in costume. One was dressed as a clown, with a shock of bright red wig hair and a wide plastic white grin stretching across his face. Another wore a long black cloak, perhaps a reaper. The third seemed to be some kind of demon, but something was terribly wrong. They weren't laughing or drunk or gesturing playfully. Their movements were methodical, silent, focused. I slowed to under 10 miles per hour, feeling my heart rate accelerate. As my car drew nearly parallel to them, I recognized the detail that screamed alarm in every fiber of my body. The black-cloaked figure wasn't just wearing a costume. His shoulders were tense, and in his hand something metallic flashed under my headlights. It wasn't a party prop. It was long and flat like a crowbar or a large screwdriver. And then I saw the fourth person. He wasn't in costume. He wore a dark jacket. He was holding onto a fifth person, a woman perhaps. She struggled slightly, but she was being pulled forcefully inside the grounds, toward the rear entrance of the house. In that instant, I understood. This was not a joke. This was not a celebration. This was an organized, armed home invasion, using the cloak of Halloween night for cover. The isolation of this neighborhood, miles away from reliable phone service, suddenly felt lethal. I saw a person being dragged away in the shadows, and one of the assailants suddenly stopped working, turning his head toward my car, the man in the clown mask. He stopped pushing the gate. His head tilted slightly, an unmistakable gesture that he had registered my presence. Not just recognizing a car driving past, but recognizing a witness. He didn't yell or wave. He just straightened up slowly, turning his entire body to face my vehicle. My stomach seized up. I had seen enough. I was not a hero. I had to flee immediately. I floored the gas pedal. The engine roared and the car shot forward. In the rearview mirror, I saw the clown figure running toward the dark van. They were fast and coordinated. Seconds later, the black van pulled away from the curb. It did not turn on its headlights. The darkness of the Halloween night was their accomplice. I was speeding down the paved road, but the van behind me was closing the distance alarmingly fast, riding my bumper. I swerved onto a smaller street. The estates was laid out like a maze. Streets looped and coiled around small lakes and golf courses. This could help me escape, but it could also trap me. I accelerated past 70 mph, well over the safety limit. My car rattled, but I dared not slow down. I knew if they caught me, I would not live to tell this story. I tried grabbing my phone. I quickly realized I was useless. No service. None at all. A wave of despair washed over me. The black van behind me never flashed its lights. It just stayed glued to my bumper. I couldn't see clearly inside, but I could feel the cold, determined presence of the predators. I knew this wasn't just a scare. It was a dedicated hunt. And I realized a terrifying truth. This road had no immediate exit. I blasted through an intersection. The pavement began to narrow, lined on both sides by dense brush. This was the partially undeveloped section of the estates, with only house foundations waiting to be built. I tried slamming the brakes and swerving sharply, hoping the van would shoot past and I could turn back toward the main road. But they were too close. Instead of overshooting, the van also braked hard, but then executed a frightening, coordinated move. Another vehicle, a gray sedan, suddenly appeared from a side road, completely blocking my escape route backward. I was trapped. Two cars. They were not random stragglers. They were a sophisticated, organized network. The black van switched on its headlights, blindingly bright, and began to creep closer. I was nearly blinded. The light reflecting off the glass made it impossible to see what was happening behind me. I was stuck in a deserted loop, with no houses nearby to run to. I had one final choice: fight or surrender. In a moment of pure, blinding panic, I recalled the urgent need to break free of a snare. I looked at the approaching van, then at my driver's side door. I cut the engine. Everything fell silent, broken only by the frantic pounding in my chest. Before the van could reach me, I pulled the parking brake, unlocked the door, and threw myself out of the driver's seat. I did not run down the road. I plunged straight into the thick brush by the roadside. Immediately, I heard their car doors open. Heavy footsteps on the pavement.
Find him.
He couldn't have gone far. The shout was no longer the voice of costumed revelers, but the command of true hunters. I ran deeper into the dark, ignoring the dry branches whipping my face. I had to utilize the darkness and the rugged terrain, my only advantages in this desolate suburban fringe. I hid behind a small mound of dirt, holding my breath. Powerful flashlights began sweeping the area around my car. I could hear them talking, voices low and frustrated. They were checking my vehicle, looking for keys, a phone, anything that might indicate my direction. The smell of sweat and damp earth filled my nostrils. I lay flat, trying to merge completely with the dense shadow. A massive silhouette, likely the clown, stepped just a few feet from me. I could sense his cold presence, his white mask momentarily seeming to glow in the flashlight beam, almost mocking me with its wide smile. He paused, took a deep breath, and began walking in the opposite direction. I lay there for perhaps 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. Eventually, I heard car doors slamming shut. The engines of the van and the gray sedan roared to life, and they began reversing, turning back toward the way they had come. They were gone, at least temporarily. They believed I had escaped and was struggling to find my way out, or perhaps they had taken what they needed from my car. I was alive. I had refused to be led to wherever they wanted to take me, but I knew they were still close. I crawled out of the brush, shaking violently. My car was still there, silent and damaged, but I dared not go back. I was exposed. I had to walk. I started running, not toward the main road, but across the open field, aiming for the faint glow I remembered seeing earlier, perhaps the security lights of another residential development. I ran until my lungs burned. I sprinted across paved streets, trying to stay out of sight of any light source. After perhaps 20 minutes of frantic running, I reached the main highway. Although the traffic light was red, I didn't hesitate. I ran straight out onto the road. Just as I cleared the curb, a car sped past. I waved my arms wildly, begging for help. Mercifully, the driver, an older man, stopped. I explained everything in breathless gasps, pointing toward the dark estates. He drove me to the nearest police station. Sitting in the precinct, I recounted my story, my voice trembling from shock and cold. The officer on duty listened grimly, but without much surprise. He explained that organized home invasions had become a growing problem in recent months, especially in isolated areas, and they often used the chaos of holidays as camouflage. I was not the first witness they had tried to corner. Weeks later, I received an update. The police confirmed the home invasion at the Tudor mansion, and they also found the black van abandoned miles away in a patch of woods. Although the attackers had escaped, the police confirmed they were a local organized crime ring that sometimes used a member to pose as a stranded person or a witness to check the road's security. Halloween night had merely been the perfect disguise. The horror I carry with me is not from ghosts or witches, but from the realization that those monsters were human, and they had used what was supposed to be a fun celebration to hunt their prey. Since that night, I have never driven through the estates again. Like others who have experienced such profound terror on empty roads, I have developed an unusual vigilance. Now, driving home late at night, I keep the pedal down, avoid any car that follows too closely, and constantly check my rearview mirror, because I know what lurks in the dark is not the supernatural, but organized predators waiting for the perfect moment to spring their trap. And sometimes, when I see carelessly packaged Halloween masks in a store, I remember the wide, white grin of that clown mask, a smile utterly devoid of joy. It makes me wonder, what would have happened if I hadn't managed to fall out of the car? That thought alone is enough to keep me awake forever.